Scientists have been searching for decades to locate the self inside the human brain, that essential you that experiences being you. Their conclusion? There's nobody home, no control center, no executive making the calls from headquarters. Instead, they discovered something far more intriguing: an open space, a luminous emptiness where thoughts, feelings, and perceptions continuously emerge and fade away. Picture a symphony orchestra without a conductor, pure coordination happening through mysterious harmony. This discovery has shattered our most fundamental assumptions about consciousness. We've been conditioned to believe that somewhere inside our skull sits a little version of ourselves, like a tiny CEO in a boardroom, making decisions and controlling our experience. But neuroscience paints a radically different picture. When researchers use advanced brain imaging to watch the brain in action, they see networks of neurons firing in complex patterns, but no central command center, no singular location where you reside. Instead, consciousness appears to be more like weather, a dynamic process emerging from countless interactions rather than a thing or a place. The implications are staggering. If there's no central self running the show, then what is this sense of being you that feels so real, so continuous, so undeniably present? This question has led scientists and philosophers to one of the most profound insights in human history. Consciousness isn't produced by the brain. It's the fundamental field in which all experience arises. The brain is more like a radio receiver, tuning into consciousness rather than generating it. Here's where almost everyone gets tripped up in their meditation practice. Nearly every person who grasps this distinction reports it revolutionized how they understand awareness itself. The confusion arises when we mistake our internal narrator for pure awareness. This mix-up is so common that it's become the primary obstacle preventing people from accessing deeper states of consciousness. To untangle these two completely different functions, let's examine how each one actually works. Your internal narrator operates through three distinct patterns: storytelling mode, judgment mode, and cheerleader mode. It monitors everything you do and think, then provides running commentary. This is the voice coaching you through meditation sessions, evaluating your performance as good or poor, the part that criticizes and the part that offers comfort. It's constantly trying to label and categorize you, though these labels shift like sand in the wind. In storytelling mode, your internal narrator weaves together your experiences into a coherent narrative. It takes the random events of your day and creates meaning, connecting dots that might not actually be connected. This mode is incredibly creative, but also incredibly deceptive. It will convince you that the person who cut you off in traffic was personally attacking you, or that your friend's delayed text response means they're angry with you. The storytelling mode is always looking for patterns, even when no patterns exist. Judgment mode is perhaps the most familiar. This is your internal critic, the voice that evaluates everything you do against some imaginary standard. It compares you to others, measures your performance, and rarely finds you adequate. But judgment mode isn't just critical. It's also the voice that praises you when you do something well. The problem is that both criticism and praise come from the same source: your conditioned mind trying to maintain control through evaluation. Cheerleader mode is the internal narrator's attempt to motivate and encourage you. It's the voice that says, "You've got this," or "Everything happens for a reason." While this might seem positive, it's still the same mechanism. Your mind trying to manage your experience through commentary. Even positive self-talk is still the internal narrator at work, not pure awareness. What makes it so easy to confuse with pure awareness is that your internal narrator also seems like a detached, serene presence observing your daily existence from a distance. It's that familiar voice that never stops talking. The internal narrator can even mimic the qualities of pure awareness. It can seem peaceful, wise, and observant. This is why so many people mistake thoughts about being present for actual presence itself. The internal narrator is also incredibly subtle. It doesn't just speak in words. It communicates through images, emotions, and even physical sensations. When you're walking down the street and suddenly feel self-conscious, that's the internal narrator creating a story about how others might be judging you. When you're in a meeting and feel confident, that's the internal narrator telling you a story about your competence. It's constantly creating your sense of self through this ongoing narrative. Pure awareness, however, remains completely silent. It simply witnesses. It doesn't engage in thinking. It just observes, absorbing everything without any reaction whatsoever. Pure awareness notices your internal narrator as well. It doesn't step in to change anything because there's no need to. It already understands that none of these mental activities define your true nature. This silence isn't empty or void. It's full of presence. It's the difference between the silence of a turned-off radio and the silence of a concert hall just before the orchestra begins. Pure awareness is pregnant with potential, alive with presence, but completely still. It's the space in which all experience happens, but it's not affected by any experience. Pure awareness has no agenda. It doesn't want your thoughts to be different, doesn't judge your emotions as good or bad, doesn't try to improve your experience. It simply is. This can be disconcerting for people who are used to their minds constantly trying to fix, change, or improve their experience. Pure awareness is radically accepting, not in a passive way, but in the way that space accepts everything that moves through it. The relationship between pure awareness and the internal narrator is like the relationship between the sky and clouds. Clouds can be beautiful or stormy, thick or thin, but they don't change the sky. The sky remains unchanged whether it's hosting a gentle breeze or a hurricane. Similarly, pure awareness remains unchanged whether your internal narrator is being critical or encouraging, whether your thoughts are peaceful or chaotic. When you really settle into pure awareness for extended periods, during profound meditation or moments of absolute stillness, you discover something absolutely mind-blowing. This awareness isn't even personal to you. The same consciousness witnessing your thoughts is identical to the consciousness witnessing mine, your friends, a hermit's in a mountain monastery, and even a stranger daydreaming on a train in Berlin. What differs is the content flowing through, the thoughts, emotions, and experiences, but the space that notices everything remains exactly the same. Untouched, universal. This realization is what mystics throughout history have called the ultimate truth. It's not that we're all connected, it's that we're all expressions of the same fundamental consciousness. The boundaries between self and other, between inner and outer, are revealed to be conceptual constructs with no ultimate reality. Your awareness and my awareness aren't two separate things that happen to be similar. They're literally the same awareness appearing as different experiences. This isn't just a philosophical concept. It's a direct, lived experience that becomes available when you stop identifying with your thoughts and start resting as the awareness that's always been here. When you realize that the awareness reading these words right now is the same awareness that's writing them, the same awareness that's witnessed every moment of human history, the same awareness that's present in every conscious being throughout the universe, something profound shifts in how you relate to yourself and others. Once you see past the mental chatter, you realize that the person you're debating with or deeply attracted to is fundamentally animated by the identical awareness that animates you. If this perspective is shifting how you see consciousness, hit that like button and subscribe for more insights that bridge ancient wisdom with modern understanding. Your internal narrator stems from your conditioned mind, shaped by your upbringing, culture, anxieties, ambitions, and insecurities. It's essentially your personal history on repeat, continuously recycling familiar patterns and casting them forward into your present and future. The conditioning that shapes your internal narrator runs incredibly deep. It begins in infancy, when you first learn to distinguish between self and other, between me and not me. This fundamental split creates the foundation for all future conditioning. As you grow, you accumulate beliefs about who you are, what you're capable of, what you deserve, what's possible for you. These beliefs become the lens through which your internal narrator interprets every experience. Cultural conditioning plays a massive role in shaping your internal narrator. If you grew up in a culture that values individual achievement, your internal narrator will constantly measure your success against others. If you grew up in a culture that values harmony and conformity, your internal narrator will focus on how well you fit in with the group. These cultural programs run so deep that most people never question them. They simply assume that their way of interpreting reality is the only way. Family conditioning is equally powerful. The way your parents related to you, the messages you received about your worth and capabilities, the emotional atmosphere of your household, all of this becomes woven into your internal narrator's programming. A child who grew up with critical parents will develop an internal narrator that's highly critical. A child who grew up with anxious parents will develop an internal narrator that's constantly scanning for threats. Religious and spiritual conditioning also shapes your internal narrator in profound ways. If you were raised with the belief that you're fundamentally flawed or sinful, your internal narrator will constantly judge your thoughts and actions. If you were raised with the belief that you're inherently divine, your internal narrator might develop a spiritual ego that judges others for not being as evolved as you are. The more positive mental habits you develop, the kinder and more refined your internal narrator becomes. This is why practices like gratitude, loving-kindness meditation, and positive affirmations can be helpful. They don't eliminate the internal narrator, but they can make it more supportive and less destructive. However, even a positive internal narrator is still the internal narrator. It's still the conditioned mind trying to manage your experience through commentary. But to truly know pure awareness, you must search in a different territory entirely. You must look beyond the realm of thought, beyond the realm of mental conditioning, beyond the realm of personal history. Pure awareness exists in a dimension that's completely untouched by your story, your personality, your achievements, or your failures. Seek it in the eternal present. It's not entangled with your history or anxious about what's coming next. It exists only in this exact moment. The present moment is the only place where pure awareness can be found, because it's the only place where reality actually exists. The past is just memory, thoughts and images arising in this moment. The future is just imagination, thoughts and images arising in this moment. Only the present moment is real, and pure awareness is the very essence of presence itself. While your internal narrator speaks, pure awareness listens. While your internal narrator evaluates, pure awareness simply exists. This isn't a passive existence. It's the most dynamic, alive, vibrant existence imaginable. Pure awareness is the source of all creativity, all intelligence, all love. It's not separate from life. It's the very essence of life itself. The present moment contains everything. All of your past experiences are available in this moment as memory. All of your future possibilities are available in this moment as potential. All of your relationships, all of your dreams, all of your fears, all of your hopes, everything exists in this eternal now. Pure awareness is your direct access to this infinite richness of the present moment. Ancient texts like the Bhagavad Gita describe you as the eternal observer. Teachers like Eckhart Tolle call you pure consciousness. Your skeptical mind might resist, but the more you attune to pure awareness, the more obvious this becomes. The resistance comes from your conditioned mind, which has been trained to believe that you are your thoughts, your emotions, your personality, your story. The idea that you might be something far more fundamental threatens the very foundation of your conditioned identity. This resistance is natural and expected. Your conditioned mind has spent decades building an elaborate sense of self, and it's not going to give up easily. It will use every trick in the book to keep you identified with your thoughts and stories. It will create spiritual experiences that feel profound, but still keep you trapped in the realm of the mind. It will generate insights that seem revolutionary, but are really just more sophisticated forms of the same old patterns. The key is to understand that you don't need to fight this resistance. You don't need to overcome your conditioned mind or destroy your internal narrator. You simply need to recognize that these are phenomena arising in pure awareness, not your true identity. When you stop trying to get rid of your thoughts and start resting as the awareness in which thoughts arise, everything changes. This awareness is the single aspect of you that remains constant through time. Consider this carefully. Everything else about you has transformed over the years. Your character, your physical form, your preferences, even your core identity. A decade ago, you were essentially a different human being by every metric. Your body has completely replaced every cell. Your personality has evolved. Your beliefs have changed. Your relationships have shifted. Your goals and dreams have transformed. But pure awareness? It's unchanged. The awareness that perceived the world when you were a child is identical to the awareness perceiving it right now. This isn't just a concept. It's something you can directly verify. When you remember being 5 years old, what is it that's remembering? When you imagine being 90 years old, what is it that's imagining? The same awareness that's present right now. This means there's a dimension of you that exists beyond time, untouched by suffering, completely immune to every narrative your mind has ever constructed about you. This isn't just a clever concept. It's transformative. When you realize that your essential nature is timeless, your relationship to aging, death, and all forms of change completely shifts. You begin to see these as experiences happening to you, not as threats to your existence. It's the same consciousness that witnessed the cosmos forming, the same profound stillness that the stars mirror in their quiet light. You've always been here. This consciousness didn't begin when you were born and won't end when you die. It's the eternal backdrop against which all experience unfolds. Birth and death are simply experiences arising in this timeless awareness. This awareness isn't some contemporary meditation trend. It's timeless, investigated by history's most brilliant minds. Think Einstein, pioneering quantum researchers, and ancient wisdom keepers all describing the same fundamental reality. Einstein spoke of a cosmic religious feeling that arises when you realize the illusory nature of individual existence. Quantum physicists have discovered that consciousness plays a fundamental role in the collapse of the wave function. That reality literally depends on observation. You can trace awareness back to the Upanishads, humanity's earliest spiritual writings, where they describe the Atman, the unchanging self, as the silent observer of all experience. The Upanishads contain some of the most profound insights ever recorded about the nature of consciousness. They describe the Atman as Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. This isn't describing three separate qualities, but one unified reality that is inherently whole, aware, and joyful. The Vedantic tradition speaks of four great statements or Mahavakyas that point directly to this truth. Tattvamasi, thou art that. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Ayam Atma Brahma, this self is Brahman. Prajnanam Brahma, consciousness is Brahman. These statements aren't meant to be understood intellectually, but realized directly through the dissolution of the false identification with the mind and body. The Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius taught similar practices, watching your mind as if you were standing outside yourself, calmly noting thoughts without becoming identified with them. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This isn't about controlling your thoughts, but about recognizing that you are the awareness in which thoughts arise, not the thoughts themselves. The Stoics understood that suffering comes from our judgments about events, not from the events themselves. When you identify as pure awareness, you naturally develop this Stoic perspective. You begin to see that your thoughts about experiences are not the experiences themselves. You realize that you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you relate to what happens to you. Your identity is essentially a narrative your mind continuously composes and revises, weaving together memories and experiences like an obsessed storyteller. This story is incredibly compelling. It has main characters, plot developments, conflicts, resolutions, and themes. You are simultaneously the author, the protagonist, and the audience of this story. The story seems so real, so important, so defining of who you are. But here's the thing about stories. They're not real. They're interpretations of reality, not reality itself. Your life story is a highly edited version of your actual experience. It highlights certain events while ignoring others. It creates causal connections that may not actually exist. It generates meaning that may be completely arbitrary. Most importantly, it creates a sense of a continuous self that persists through time, when in reality, you're constantly changing. This storytelling capacity represents the extraordinary ability of human consciousness to step back from life and reflect upon itself, to become aware of its own existence and evaluate its own functioning. The mind operates like a sophisticated feedback loop, a concept from engineering that allows systems to self-regulate. This feedback mechanism enables any system to monitor the results of its own actions and make adjustments accordingly. In human consciousness, this feedback loop becomes incredibly complex. You're not just aware of your actions. You're aware of your awareness of your actions. You're not just thinking. You're thinking about thinking. You're not just feeling. You're feeling about feeling. This creates layers upon layers of self-reflection that can become so intricate that you lose track of what's actually happening versus what you're thinking about what's happening. The feedback loop can become a trap. You can become so focused on monitoring and adjusting your experience that you lose touch with the direct experience itself. You start living in your head instead of living in reality. This is why many people report feeling disconnected from their lives, as if they're watching their lives from the outside instead of actually living them. But this same capacity for self-reflection can also be your liberation. When you use this ability to become aware of awareness itself, you discover the source of all experience. You realize that you're not just the content of consciousness, you're consciousness itself. This shift from being lost in the story to recognizing yourself as the storyteller, and ultimately as the awareness in which all stories arise, is the essence of spiritual awakening. You've probably noticed how some people desperately crave being the center of attention. Your thoughts behave exactly the same way. Thoughts are like attention-seeking children. They want to be noticed, acknowledged, and taken seriously. When you give your thoughts this kind of attention, they multiply and intensify. When you stop feeding them with your attention, they naturally quiet down. This doesn't mean you should try to stop thinking or suppress your thoughts. That's impossible and counterproductive. Instead, you learn to change your relationship to your thoughts. Instead of being the star of your thoughts, you become the audience. Instead of being the actor in the drama, you become the witness to the drama. Once you begin identifying as pure awareness, you'll recognize that your thoughts are like ambient noise in a busy cafe. They're there, they're happening, but they don't require your full attention. You can be aware of them without being absorbed in them. You can hear them without listening to them. You can notice them without believing them. This shift is incredibly liberating. When you realize that you are not your thoughts, you're free to think whatever you want without being defined by it. You can have angry thoughts without being an angry person. You can have fearful thoughts without being a fearful person. You can have sad thoughts without being a sad person. Your thoughts become weather patterns moving through the sky of your awareness. Make pure awareness your home base. The method is straightforward. The more you catch awareness in action, the more effortless it becomes. It's like learning to drive or figuring out how to use a smartphone. The more you practice, the less conscious effort it requires. At first, you have to consciously remember to identify as awareness. But gradually, this becomes your natural state. The practice isn't about achieving some special state of consciousness. It's about recognizing the consciousness that's already here. You don't need to create awareness. You need to notice that you already are awareness. You don't need to become enlightened. You need to recognize that your essential nature is already enlightened. This recognition can happen in an instant, but integrating it into your daily life is an ongoing process. Your conditioned mind will constantly try to pull you back into identification with thoughts and stories. This is normal and expected. The key is to be patient and gentle with yourself as you gradually shift your identity from the content of consciousness to consciousness itself. There's absolutely nothing abnormal about extended periods of quiet observation. Cats naturally do this, as do dogs and other restless creatures. Indigenous peoples across all cultures practice this art. Animals don't struggle with being present. They simply are present. They don't need to practice mindfulness. They are mindfulness. Human beings are the only creatures that seem to have lost this natural ability. We've developed such sophisticated thinking minds that we've forgotten how to simply be. We've become so identified with our thoughts that we've lost touch with the awareness that's always been here. We've become so busy doing that, we've forgotten how to be. The challenge is greatest for those who've developed their analytical minds to such a degree that they can't stop making predictions about tomorrow, requiring constant mental stimulation to avoid anxiety. The more intelligent you are, the more difficult it can be to simply be. Intelligence becomes a trap when it's used to avoid the present moment rather than to embrace it. But it appears that being unable to sit quietly and watch with a completely peaceful mind means being unable to fully experience the world we inhabit. You cannot truly know reality simply by thinking about it and manipulating it. First, you must experience it more directly and sustain that experience without rushing to conclusions. Direct experience is immediate, wordless, and complete. It's the difference between reading about the taste of chocolate and actually tasting chocolate. No amount of description can substitute for the direct experience. Similarly, no amount of thinking about awareness can substitute for the direct recognition of awareness. This direct experience is available right now. You don't need to meditate for years or study ancient texts or travel to exotic locations. You simply need to notice what's already here. You need to recognize that the awareness that's reading these words is the same awareness that mystics throughout history have pointed to as the ultimate reality. To access pure awareness, you discover a state of no mind. This no-mind state means using your entire consciousness, the way you use your eyes when you gaze at different objects, without trying to capture or analyze anything. It's a state of open, receptive awareness that takes in everything without grasping anything. No mind doesn't mean unconsciousness or mental blankness. It means a state of consciousness that's not dominated by thinking. It's like the difference between a turbulent lake and a still lake. The turbulent lake is choppy and agitated, making it impossible to see clearly to the bottom. The still lake is calm and transparent, allowing you to see all the way to the bottom. When your mind is still, you can see clearly into the depths of your own consciousness. You can recognize the awareness that's always been here, but has been obscured by mental activity. You can experience the peace that surpasses understanding, the joy that doesn't depend on circumstances, the love that needs no object. Pure awareness isn't some mystical entity available only to spiritual seekers with elaborate meditation routines. It's the most ordinary thing in the world. It's what you are right now, in this moment, as you read these words. It's not special or exotic. It's the most natural, fundamental aspect of your being. The reason it seems mystical or special is that we've been conditioned to believe that we are our thoughts, our emotions, our personalities, our stories. We've been taught that consciousness is something the brain produces, something that emerges from matter. But the direct experience reveals the opposite. Matter emerges from consciousness, not the other way around. This doesn't require you to believe anything or adopt any particular worldview. It simply requires you to notice what's already here. You don't need to change your beliefs about consciousness. You need to recognize consciousness itself. You don't need to understand how awareness works. You need to recognize that you are awareness. Buddhism recognizes 4 fundamental human activities: walking, standing, sitting, and lying down, as the 4 noble postures, representing the positions that Buddha nature naturally assumes in human form. These 4 postures encompass all possible human activities. Everything you do falls into one of these categories. This means that every moment of your life is an opportunity to recognize your Buddha nature. The 4 postures aren't just physical positions, they're states of consciousness. Walking represents the dynamic aspect of awareness, consciousness in motion. Standing represents the balanced aspect of awareness, consciousness in equilibrium. Sitting represents the receptive aspect of awareness, consciousness at rest. Lying down represents the surrendered aspect of awareness, consciousness in complete relaxation. When you bring awareness to these 4 postures, You transform ordinary activities into spiritual practice. Walking becomes walking meditation. Standing becomes standing meditation. Sitting becomes sitting meditation. Lying down becomes lying meditation. You don't need to add anything special to these activities. You simply need to bring awareness to them. Without projecting into tomorrow, each moment requires thinking only of this day and this hour. This isn't about living recklessly or failing to plan for the future. It's about recognizing that the future exists only as a concept in this moment. The only reality is what's happening right now. When you're truly present, you naturally respond to what's needed without getting lost in endless planning and worrying. This presence brings tremendous clarity and effectiveness to your actions. When you're not divided between the present moment and thoughts about the future, you can give your full attention to what you're doing. This total attention is what creates mastery in any field. Whether you're cooking, working, parenting, or creating art, presence is the key to excellence. People fear releasing their grip on their thinking minds, terrified of falling into emptiness with nothing to grasp. This fear is understandable. Your thinking mind has been your primary tool for navigating life. It seems like giving up thinking would leave you helpless and vulnerable, but this fear is based on a misunderstanding of what thinking actually is and what pure awareness offers. Thinking is a tool, not an identity. When you identify as pure awareness, you don't lose the ability to think. You gain the ability to use thinking consciously rather than being used by it. You can think when thinking is needed and rest in awareness when thinking is not needed. You become the master of your mind rather than its slave. They don't realize that this apparent void isn't actually empty, but the authentic dimension of the sacred. This void is pregnant with infinite potential. It's the source from which all thoughts, all emotions, all experiences arise. It's not a blank nothingness. It's a luminous fullness that contains everything while being attached to nothing. The sacred isn't separate from ordinary life. It's the very essence of ordinary life. Every moment, every breath, every thought, every sensation is sacred because it's arising in the sacred space of awareness. When you recognize this, your entire life becomes a spiritual practice. You don't need to go to special places or do special things to experience the sacred. You simply need to recognize the sacred nature of what's already here. This void cannot be pursued or discovered, understood through intellect or information, described in language, touched physically, or achieved through good deeds. It's not an object that can be grasped or a state that can be attained. It's the very ground of your being, the essence of what you are. You can't get closer to it because you already are it. You can't achieve it because you already have it. You can't find it because you never lost it. This is why all seeking ultimately fails. You can't find what you already are. You can't achieve what you already have. You can't become what you already are. All spiritual practices, all teachings, all techniques are ultimately pointing you back to what you are right now, in this moment, before any practice or teaching or technique. However, surrendering to this apparent emptiness is awakening itself, dissolving into the boundless, and recognizing you were never separate to begin with. This surrender isn't a giving up, it's a giving in. It's not a defeat, it's a victory. It's not a loss, it's a finding. When you stop trying to grasp awareness and instead let awareness embrace you, you discover that you were never separate from it. This surrender happens naturally when you realize that resistance is futile. You can't control consciousness any more than you can control the weather. You can't manage awareness any more than you can manage the ocean. You can't possess pure awareness any more than you can possess space. The only sane response is to surrender to what is, to relax into what's already here, to rest as what you are. This void isn't nothingness, but the creative source of everything, the origin from which thought, form, and time itself continuously emerge. It's the womb of creation, the matrix of manifestation, the source of all possibilities. From this emptiness, entire universes are born. From this silence, all sounds arise. From this stillness, all movement flows. Understanding this creative aspect of awareness changes everything. You realize that you're not just a passive observer of reality. You're an active participant in creation. Your consciousness isn't separate from the creative force of the universe. It is the creative force of the universe. Every thought, every emotion, every action is the universe creating itself through you. This creative power is not something you possess, it's something you are. You don't have creative power. You are creative power. You don't have consciousness, you are consciousness. You don't have awareness, you are awareness. This shift from having to being is the essence of spiritual realization. What's particularly fascinating is that this recognition creates a paradox that mystics have described for millennia. You are simultaneously the one who watches and what is being watched. The observer and the observed are revealed to be one unified field of consciousness experiencing itself. This isn't just philosophical poetry. It's the direct experience that emerges when you stop trying to find yourself and instead rest as the awareness that's already here. This paradox dissolves the fundamental duality that creates suffering. When you realize that there's no separation between observer and observed, between self and other, between consciousness and its contents, you discover a profound peace. There's no longer anything to defend, nothing to protect, no one to become. You're already whole, already complete, already perfect as you are. The search for enlightenment ends when you realize you've always been both the seeker and what you're seeking. The spiritual journey is ultimately circular. You end up where you started, but you see it for the first time. You realize that what you were seeking was always already here, closer than your own breath, more intimate than your own thoughts. This doesn't mean the journey was pointless. The journey was necessary to bring you to this recognition. All the seeking, all the practices, all the teachings were leading you back to this simple truth. You are awareness itself. The journey ends not with the attainment of some special state, but with the recognition of your original nature. Understanding your role as the observer opens the door to something even more profound, how your awareness literally shapes the reality you experience. The observer effect reveals why your consciousness doesn't just witness reality, but actively participates in creating it through the very act of observing.